Here's to whiskey kisses, the peaty taste of sin, Edinburgh morning with the smell of brewing on the wind.
Greetings, whiskey folk, and welcome back to Drinking Out Loud. We are on episode 55 now. Would you believe it? It's been well over a year, and we're 55 episodes deep, and it's time to celebrate by welcoming to the show a member of a legendary whiskey family from over in Scotland. Ladies and gentlemen, speaking to us over Zoom, because that's the way we do things now, Richard Urquhart, all the way in Scotland. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Hi, Adam. Great to be here, and thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, Richard is, of course, as you can see in his background there, going to be talking to us about Benromach today. Of course, the Urquhart family is known not only for Benromach, but for many, many other things as well, which we'll probably we'll talk about that a little bit at the end, because I think we'll be having you back on the show in a few weeks. But today is all about Benromach, and in your capacity, you're in charge of sales in North America. Is that correct, Richard?
Yeah, my current title is Head of Sales America, so covering South America, the USA, and Canada is my main markets.
So it must be pretty strange for you being trapped in Scotland for a while, then, eh?
Yeah, the role for the last 10 years, I've had the privilege of traveling the world, talking about our brands and meeting customers and consumers and trying to build our brands internationally. And for the last 14 months or around then, it's been Zoom meetings from a spare bedroom. It's not quite the same to what I was used to, but it's still great to be able to come and speak to you live, and almost as good as being there in person.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things where although it may be slightly lacking in certain ambiance, not having presenters as yourself in person in places, but you can get a whole lot further through this medium, right? You've probably visited digitally a whole lot more places than you would have done physically in the last year.
Yeah, I mean, I've helped out some colleagues by doing some events in China in the morning, and then doing some events in North America in the afternoon. So there's no other way we'd be able to do as many kind of events and tastings and speaking to people without using technology. So we are getting much further than we normally do, and saving the environment by not getting on as many planes as we used to.
Absolutely. So we are doing this series of special tastings in conjunction with the Victoria Whisky Festival 2021, the festival that technically didn't happen, but is kind of, in a sense, happening right now, right this second. And this is one of the tastings that, had it happened in person, would have absolutely been one of the major highlights of the festival. This wouldn't have just been a what do they call them, a masterclass. This would have been a grand tasting, right? We've got some incredible whiskies coming up on here with a fantastic presenter as well to boot. It's good that in some capacity we're still able to do this. And what's even better is we're also going to be supporting charity whilst doing this as well. So through this tasting, we're working with some independent local whiskey clubs who are going to be joyously sampling some of these along with us on later on YouTube. And we also have the 2021 Victoria Whisky Festival Glencans, which I'm using today as a water glass, because I'm going to be using the little mini Glencans today, because 8 whiskies at 8 a.m. is a bit much for me. So I'm using my big Glencairn as a water glass today. But if you're interested in picking up one of the Victoria Whisky Festival 2021 official Glencairns, we do have some still in stock at the Strath at strathliquor.com. All of the proceeds for that will go to this month's charity. And this month's charity, we decided to stay local, but go a little bit further out from Victoria. We're going to Saanich. We're going to be supporting the Saanich Peninsula Lions Food Bank this month. All of the proceeds from both the tasting and the glasses will be going to that well-deserving charity. So, Benromach, it's exciting. I was very excited to have Benromach, originally at the festival when we thought it might have a chance of going ahead, and then, of course, at this digital tasting, because I'm a relatively new sort of, I don't want to say convert necessarily. I never had a negative opinion of Benromach, but it's only recently that I've really delved in and really thoroughly discovered Benromach in a sense. And part of that is simply, in the past, it was a harder whiskey to get a hold of here in British Columbia. They've changed the agents relatively recently, and the new agents are a little bit more involved, especially in bringing in some of the more unique, rarer, interesting bottlings. In the past, we pretty much just had the 10 We once had some of the 100 proof 10 version as well, and that's about the only Benromachs I've ever had. And of course, one of the biggest reasons that here in BC I personally hadn't had too many Benromachs is that you very, very, very rarely see them through independent bottlers. Our store is a Scotch Malt Whisky Society partner store, and I think the last time an SNWS Benromach came out was in the year 2000, which is long before it was even in Canada. So yeah, I just haven't had that much of experience with Benromach, but thankfully I've managed to actually sample all of the new core range apart from the 21, which I'm really looking forward to trying, and a couple of special editions more recently with the new representative company bringing them in, and they absolutely blew me away. So I'm really looking forward to going through a whole. We're actually doing 8s today. We're doing an 8 Benromach vertical, which is pretty cool. And yeah, what can you tell us about Benromach's sort of essence? What makes Benromach Benromach? What are you aiming for with this style of whiskey?
So the simple way for that is we're an old school Speyside distillery. So we're making Speyside whiskey the way it was made 50 or 60 years ago. So everything is handcrafted, well, made by hand. There's no technology, made the way it used to be made in Speyside, when distilleries were family owned, independent, and making their spirit at the distillery. So it's all about bringing back that lost taste of Speyside.
Nice. And yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I've gone on record several times on this show to say that I don't really believe in the significance of regions these days. I mean, they're very significant, of course, in terms of the historical and the cultural aspect of distillation, and it is obviously worthwhile mentioning on the bottle. But just because something says Speyside doesn't mean it's going to taste like a Glenfiddich, right? That's the regions that I feel like these days, especially more so as people have diverged back into sort of more rustic styles of whiskey making, like yourself, or gone in the opposite direction and gone for like brand new styles of whiskey making. I feel like the regions are all kind of blurring together a little bit. Do you find the same? Or?
Yeah, I think regionality is not as strong as it used to be in terms of styles, because you get unpeated Islas, you get peated Islas, you get unpeated Speysides, peated Speysides, and so on.
Yeah.
One difference I would make about the kind of the peatiness you do see, because Benromach is a lightly peated whiskey. It's using a different kind of type of peat than you'd find on the island, so it's not getting the same medicinal iodine that you get from Isla. You're getting this bonfire, more of a wood smoke, and it's a much lighter smoke. But back when distilleries were using their own full maltings, peat would have been used in Speyside, so that's why we're bringing back that lost style. So even though Speyside isn't known for being peated these days, there was always an element of peat being used in Speyside if you go back far enough. And the stat that I always get told was between 1940 and 1945, during World War II, peat was heavily used. But when the limited amount of whiskey that was made was produced in Speyside, it was heavily peated because that was the fuel source that was more readily available or not rationed. So when we look back, this is where the Gold MacPhail business really helps us in terms of showing how whiskey used to be made. Under Gold MacPhail, we have whiskies that are still maturing from the 1940s. 50s, 60s, 70s. We have samples in our liquid library that shows us how these casks have changed over a period of time, and also how regionality and distillery character has changed through modernization over the decades as well. So we can go back in time and look at cask samples to show how Speyside whiskies like Glen Grant, Macallan, and these type of distilleries would have had an element of peat back in the 1940s.
Wow. Oh, that's really cool. And yeah, we'll get into that a little bit more. But before we do, it's always one of those things. But before we get too carried away, we should pour ourselves some whiskey. So let's start off with the Benromach 10, because I feel like that's the best place to begin. Would you say this is the sort of the leader of the core range in terms of sales? This is probably it. I would assume it's probably the best selling.
Yeah, it's our biggest seller in the portfolio at the moment, but we are a very small distillery. So when we say biggest seller, that's still quite small for whiskey terms. But it's definitely the first product that has that signature Benromach style, that elegant, fruity character with that slight touch of smoke.
Nice. And it's one of the things that I really enjoy about the branding is right there on the logo mark, it says exclusively first fill cask matured. It's like you're so confident in that you're putting it like on the logo.
Yeah, it's Benromach's always been a distillery where we've been using first fill casks. And when we did our rebrand, which came out last year, which is the packaging we have today, since we do it, we felt we should put that on the label to actually tell everyone that we do actually do only use first fill casks. It's the great thing about being in the whiskey business as a family and as a business for 125 years. We have great access to casks in Spain, and we buy our American bourbon casks locally, but with our sherry casks, sorry, we're working with some companies that we've been working with for over 100 years. So we get this great access to some of these really high quality sherry casks. So we spend a lot of money to get access to them and get these casks, and they're always first fill. So we feel that, yeah, let's just put in the packaging to make sure people are aware that's actually what we do.
Nice. I think that's an excellent idea. I have to say, outside of whiskey, I also work in graphic design, and I absolutely adore the new branding. It is just beautiful. It makes me smile. It's so well put together, so well structured. I love just the high contrast red on white and the black on white. That's gorgeous. Good job. Did you hire an outside firm, or is this a family job?
It was an outside firm, but if you ever, hopefully you'll get a chance to come to Benromach in the future. And the distillery itself has got white buildings, a big red chimney, all the doors are red. So the packaging now really just aligns to the core colors of the distillery itself. So that means it now all looks like it fits together. And the logo is much more like the original logo that was on the distillery roof back in the 1960s. So it's now got a nice link back to where the brand actually started.
Nice. And we're getting one of the downsides, I believe, of recording an episode of Drinking Out Loud at 8 a.m. is, I believe, housekeeping, because I'm in a hotel room right now. The housekeeping has just gone by, so sorry about the extra noise in the background. All right. That was a really interesting pop sound. It was just like a pop gun, right? Oh, yeah. That is just beautiful.
So with the 10-year-old, it's bottled at 43%, as is all our kind of core range, the 10, the 15, and the 21. It's matured in first fill casks, we just discussed, and it is matured in a mixture of sherry, ex-sherry casks, and ex-bourbon casks, but with a weighting more towards sherry casks.
So the sherry seems more prominent on the nose from the get-go.
Yeah, so the bourbon cask we use are more like a balancing cask. So we want a consistent product year after year. If we use only first fill sherry, it'd be potentially harder to get with a first fill policy to get a consistency that we're looking for. Whereas using American and European old casks, we can actually adjust the ratio slightly to make sure we get that consistency that we're looking for. So with our years old whiskies, our 10, 15, and 21, it's always about getting that consistency batch after batch. And that's why using that sherry and bourbon cask, European and American oak typically gives us that balance and that ability to get that consistency.
Nice. That makes a lot of sense, and it's one of the things I've always had a soft spot for whiskies that have a blend of multiple casks together. It's one of the reasons why I went deep recently. Like for the last couple of years, I've been really enjoying blended malts, especially. But then going because I kind of got too used to single cask whiskey, I think, in a sense. And as much as I love the individuality of single cask whiskey, and we will be getting into one of those in a short while, I really do like the much more complexity and balance you can get from a much more well considered whiskey, in a sense. I mean, with a single cask, you almost get what you're given. I mean, you go through and pick the ones that are spectacular, and the ones that work well on their own. But with something like this, where it's got the blender's touch to it, you've got so much more room to sort of mold it into exactly what you want it to be.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's about consistency, making sure you get the right flavor profile. When you do vintage whiskies, so a batch, vintage, or a single cask, it's more about the quality to make sure it's at the right quality standard. But each batch or each single cask would be different to the next one. There'd be similarities if it's the same cask type from the same distillery, the same age, but it wouldn't be exactly the same. But that's what we're looking for here. This is classic Benromach, elegant, fruity, and that slight touch of smoke. Our
And
core range is peated to 12 to 14 parts per million. So the phenol
mm,
content, and we measure in parts per million, and it's at 12 to 14 makes up that kind of core style for Benromach.
that's very cool. So the thing that really punches me on the nose here is that it's not overly sweet, it's not overly savory. It's kind of both in the middle, and I'm getting sort of a hickory smoke kind of thing on the nose, but I'm also getting I want to say it's not quite the right flavor, but it feels like this is the right sort of balance of like a grilled tomato, right? It's like one of the big beefsteak tomatoes. It's got that little touch of sweetness, but it's also kind of savory. It's a
Yeah,
really
I've not heard that way described before, but it's the nicest thing about Scotch whiskey is everyone's got different noses and can relate to different types of or different aromas and different flavors. So it's
mhm.
yeah, for me it's the sherry gives a bit of sweetness coming through. You give it a zesty orange. You get a little bit of honey from the American oak, slight bit of kind of citrus, but you don't really get the kind of the dried fruits until you really try the whiskey.
Yeah, I haven't actually sampled it yet. I've just been going in on the nose, but slanch of let's go for it. Mm. Oh yeah, yeah. The sherry, the dried fruit sherry notes. You're right, definitely. I'm getting kind of like maybe like a dried apricot almost.
Yeah,
It's a slightly lighter fruit than going like straight prunes and raisins and things. Yeah, it's a little creamy as well, right?
yeah. Butterscotch is something
Mm.
that we get quite common as a taste note.
So I think the thing I've actually been singing Benromach 10's praises for the last few months since we got the new branding in, because one of the weird things, I don't know if you're aware, that came along with the new branding and the new representation here in BC is that the price dropped quite significantly for us, and I think that's one of the reasons that I suddenly sort of paid more attention. I don't know. Maybe you could tell me. Did the recipe change much between the branding? Is it pretty much the same
No,
juice?
it's exactly the same juice.
Cool.
So no change to quality.
Yeah.
Exactly the same maturation policy. Everything's exactly the same, except the packaging changed.
Nice.
The pricing point you referred to, that was we changed to our national agency. I mean, we had some great partners that we worked with before, but to get Benromach to the right pricing and the right representation across the whole of Canada, we
Hmm.
now work with a fourth generation family business, Authentic Wine and Spirits. And they
Yeah.
actually have a link to Benromach, the family behind Authentic, the Hobbs family. And they used to own Benromach back in the 1930s.
Oh wow.
So there's a link to the distillery back then. But one of the first things we did was we went for a more standard price point across the whole of Canada,
Hmm.
because it was quite different. Because as you're aware, every province has different taxes, and we had, I mean, Benromach 10 was up at $120+ in BC, and it
Yeah.
was at $69 in Nova Scotia,
Yeah.
and it was variable in between. So because we wanted to try and make it fair for customers throughout Canada, we've got a strategy to get that kind of more constant pricing through the whole market now, and so
And
that's why you notice a change coming through there.
I can certainly say that in our stores in particular, it has worked like really, really well. We've sold more Benromach 10 in the last, I think, 3 months than we have in like the preceding 3 years. So like people have really started to pay attention to this because it does feel so much. I mean, it was one of those whiskeys where it didn't feel too expensive for what it was previously. It felt, it was a little much. But this is just such good value now. There's very little like this whiskey that you can get in the price point that it's at. Which I'll get into in a second, because I'm not sure if you're aware, Richard, but anything that gets put out on these videos also gets special promotional pricing at the Strath for a period of time. So actually, I'll announce it right now. Everything that we're getting on this video will be 10% off as it gets either revealed or released, because we do have some new releases here today as well. And that means if you go to strathliquor.com right now here in BC, you can get the Benromach 10. Its normal price is $78.17, and you can get it for $70.36 right now, which is ridiculous, frankly.
Do you ship to Scotland at that price, or do I need to buy locally?
Only within Canada, I'm afraid. If you've got a mailbox somewhere, we can send it to you. But yeah, it really is like just an incredible price for this whiskey. I've no idea how you guys managed to make it happen in BC, but we're incredibly grateful that you did, because we do get the short end of the stick here often, especially in pricing compared to our neighboring province, Alberta. But this is, this is on par with, as you said, with the whole country now, which I think is a brilliant strategy. I really do. Yeah, magic. And one of the things that I love about this whiskey personally is I'm a real big fan of that mainland peat style. For those who know me, who are probably watching the YouTube channel right now and joining in on the live chat. Hi, live chat, by the way. It's good to see you. The one distillery that you'll often hear me say is one of my absolute favorites is Ardmore, and this has that same kind of peat style as Ardmore, I think. And interestingly, it's actually from the Benromach distillery was founded in the same year as Ardmore was. So it probably harkens back to a similar sort of setup and a similar kind of idea. But what this does that like the Ardmore doesn't do is these official bottlings are just magnificent. I've always been disappointed with the official Ardmores. I've only ever really shown much interest in things like the Gordon MacPhail Ardmores or the SNWS Ardmores, the Indie Ardmores. And yeah, to be able to get an official bottling, consistent product of this style with sherry as well into the mix is that this price is just absolutely magnificent.
Yeah, I completely agree. Some of the Ardmores are quite similar. The G&M distillery label Ardmore, the current ones, I think, a 1999 vintage.
Mm-hmm.
It's predominantly first world sherry, really dark and rich, and you're getting that same kind of light smoke and that kind of richness that comes through. So yeah, it's a similar flavor profile.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. And I think one of the things that really got people thinking about this whiskey as well. And I'm sorry if I'm mentioning other brands too much. I know that's sometimes a bit of a faux pas in these tastings, but we're all friends here. One of the things that we had a huge boom in popularity of Springbank over here, which was unfortunate for BC because we don't really get any. It's incredibly hard to get. And I think there was, I can't remember who it was. There was a prominent one of the podcasters. It might have been Trenny and C. It might have been Foodquake. It was one of the podcasters, the YouTubers over here in BC, that started equating the Benromach lineup as the perfect alternative to Springbank, and people just kind of jumped on that. And I think that's the fact that it's available and we can get the special editions, and the fact that it's got that sort of lightly peated touch of sherry, kind of interesting spirit characteristic to it as well, has really got people sort of, this is a really good route to go down. And a lot of people had never really heard of Benromach before the last couple of years here in BC. So it's really good that we're I'm excited about the brand, and I want to get it out there to as many people as possible. Well,
thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. I guess I could tell you a little bit about the size of the distillery, because we are a small distillery. Mm-hmm. We're only making just under 400,000 litres of alcohol per year. So it's not a huge amount of spirit being made there.
Frankly, it's amazing we get any at all in BC.
But that equates to, it does equate to over 1 million bottles if you at 10 years old. So if you try and look at potential sales. But one thing that for us as a distillery, we don't put any of our spirit to blending. It's all matured and then bottled by us as Benromach and single malt. So that does make our size bigger, because a lot of other distilleries will put a proportion of their output to blends, whereas we're just not big enough to do that. And we didn't have a desire to do that when we actually bought the distillery back in 1993. When we bought the distillery in 1993, it had been mothballed and closed down for 10 years, and we had to re-equip it over a 5-year period. And that gives it the ability to actually put in equipment the size that we were comfortable with, and that was just one pair of stills and a maximum capacity around that 500,000. So we can increase capacity a little bit more from where we are, but it will never be a big distillery. And that's not really what Benromach's about. Benromach is that kind of small, traditional, handcrafted distillery.
Beautiful. And yeah, I really like that about Benromach as well. It's got such a beautiful sort of, it feels, I don't know, well thought out, I guess, in a sense. It feels like it's got a plan, right? It doesn't feel like it's making whiskey for making whiskey's sake and it's going to do whatever happens with that whiskey. It feels like every drop of stuff that comes off that still has got sort of more intent and passion behind it than most.
I mean, we've been around the whiskey industry as a family for coming up for 126 years later this month. And over that time, we've worked with over 100 different distilleries through our independent bottling business called MacPhail. So we've learned how to mature different types of spirit, and all that knowledge that we've acquired from the MacPhail side, we use that knowledge to make the best possible whiskey we can at Benromach. So even though we're quite a young brand in terms of we're only been around effectively since 2004 is when we launched our first whiskey that we made ourselves. We've got all that knowledge that we've acquired over the last 120 plus years.
Yeah, nice. All right, well, let's move on to the next of the core range. Because this, although, you know, the 10, as we talked about, is actually, I'll keep it out of the box. I'll keep it in frame even. Although we, you know, of course, talk about the 10 being the most popular in terms of sales, and certainly the one that made people go, oh, okay, yeah, okay, let's give this one a try. The 15 is the one that I've been hearing most people talk about recently. I feel like this is the one that has surprised the most people, and I think it's won a couple of awards as well, right?
Yeah, so all the core range, the 10, the 15, and 21 have all won double golds at San Francisco. That's just been this last week or so. They've both won multiple awards. Ben 10, Benromach 10, as we call it, would be the most award-winning in terms of volume awards. But Benromach 15 has won the bigger awards. So, for example, the World Whiskey Awards, it won Best Spaced Whiskey out of all age categories a couple of years ago.
Oh wow!
So we're very proud of both of all our whiskies, but the 15 is one that it seems to hit a really nice point in terms of maturation and the way the flavour has evolved through that extra 5 years. The additional richness from the more sherry cask influence coming through, and that smokiness getting a little bit softer means that you're getting it's just an evolution of the 10, and it's a whiskey we sell out of our allocation every year, so it seems to be working really well for us.
Nice. So how different is the ratio of sherry and bourbon in this one?
It's very much the same, just that extra 5 years, so that the sherry casks take a bit more kind of that influence. So we don't really talk about percentages because it depends on each batch about that consistency. But the 15 would probably, if you try to work it back to a ratio, it would be at least 2/3 first fill sherry and 1/3 first fill bourbon.
Yeah. So apparently I didn't take the foil all the way off last time. I didn't notice that you've actually got like red stoppers. That's really nice. That's a good touch. Alrighty. It's satisfying, and I have to admit, I've actually purchased a bottle of the 10 myself. I have one at home, so I've been enjoying that a little bit. The 15, I haven't actually purchased a bottle yet. I'm sure I will. I just need to, make room for it on the shelf. So the times I've tried it have been from the little tiny sample bottles. It's just so much more satisfying pouring it out of the full size bottle, isn't it? All right. Ooh, it's deeper, isn't it?
Yeah, it's mainly matured in first fill European oak sherry hogsheads, and that's given it that additional intensity with that additional 5 years coming through. Our main kind of supplier of European oak sherry hogsheads is a company called Williams and Humbert, and this is a company that we actually used to bottle their sherry for them in Scotland 100 years ago. So we went from being a licensed bottler and getting sent casks for sherry, and then using those casks, to then actually working with them now to buy casks. The only difference now is we're mainly buying seasoned casks, not buying expedited casks. So casks that we actually get built to our specification, and we get seasoned with all the Russell sherry for hogsheads, so the 250-litre casks for at least 2 years. For our bigger sherry butts, it's at least 3 years, and we then take them back to Scotland after that. But we work with 3 companies in total, but Williams Humbert is the one we've been working with for the longest.
Nice. Yeah, it's got so much more of that sort of almost sort of earthy, coffee, chocolatey thing going on the nose.
Yeah, the sweetness is different. It's less. The American oak is definitely much softer in this one, and that European oak big sherry cask is definitely started to take a lot more dominance in the whiskey. But as that sherry cask influence has increased over that additional 5 years, that smokiness has just softened a little bit. Mm-hmm. So you don't get the same amount of smokiness. There's a very subtle smokiness at this age.
Yeah, on the nose at least, I haven't gone in for a sample yet this morning, but on the nose at least, I would say that the smoke, it's almost the same volume, but it feels a little bit more integrated in a sense. It's the things around it are kind of matching it more.
Yeah, I mean, if we had a time machine, we would be trying to go back in time to lay down more whiskey to be 15-year-old whiskey just now.
Yeah,
but that's the thing about Scotch whiskey, we can't speed up time. So in the future, we will have more 15-year-old whiskey available, but it's just going to take some time for us to get stock into that age bracket.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing. I mean, one of the things about whiskey that has always intrigued me is that balance of the distillery characteristic with the spirit and the effect of the wood. And it was actually, I was sitting in on a class with Mike Nicholson, who has worked with many of the distilleries in Diageo and has been most recently working over here with Victoria Caledonia, Macaloni's Caledonia as they're now called. And he would have that little graph of each distillery as like where the perfect intersection of maturation and distillation, where that sits, and how for some distilleries like Glenfiddich, they believe it sits in that sort of 12 to 18 mark, and other distilleries it might sit more in that 6 to 12. Some it's even more that 18 to 25. Do you personally feel like Benromach has a sweet spot for age, or is it just different, at different spots?
So we look at it slightly differently. We look at the effect the cask has on the spirit rather than where it can get to. The cask defines how long we can mature it for. And that's down to our Gormagh Trail heritage. So working with lighter distilleries, like Strathmill, for example, we would use a cask that unlikely even with the lightest cask influence it would ever get to 30, 40, 50 years old. Whereas a distillery like Mortlach, any cask we use, the spirit is so much heavier, more bolder, that we'd actually use quite a heavy cask, so a lot of sherry casks to actually get the right influence. So that would take a bit longer to get to that point. So a bit of smokiness as well plays a part. So we can release a whiskey younger with a bit of smokiness because that helps mask any of those kind of unwanted characteristics you get at a younger age. So with Benromach, we make a medium to heavy spirit. So we use a lot of first fill casks and predominantly sherry casks. So we feel those type of casks, it needs to be kind of 10 and above to really get that balance. 15 seems to be a sweet spot right now, but we'll see as we get to the older expressions where that is. I mean, we're only 23 years into our Benromach journey. We need a bit more time to actually work out where the exact sweet spot is. So we've got another 22 years to go before we can, another 27 years to go before we can get to a 50-year-old that we made ourselves.
Yeah.
We do have older whiskies in the portfolio, which we'll try one later on, the 45-year-old, but they were all made before we owned distillery. They were either casks that we bought when we acquired the distillery in 1993, or that we already had through our Gormagh Fail business, because we used to bottle Gormagh Fail Benromach under our Constance Choice range and cask strength range up until the mid-90s. So that is a different style of Benromach because it was made in different stills, it was made for a different purpose, but it's still made at Benromach Distillery.
Nice. Actually, and then that brings up a fantastic question: is what was the deciding factor in Gormagh Fail just purchasing Benromach? What drew you guys to this distillery?
There's a couple of reasons for that. The main one, from my perspective, was my grandfather's dream. So we're a fourth-generation family business. My great-grandfather joined Gormagh Fail as an apprentice in 1895, just after it opened. My grandfather joined the business in 1933, and the Gormagh Fail became owned by the Urquhart family in 1915. And it's been in the Urquhart family, so I'm still owned by the Urquhart family ever since. So we always, my grandfather always wanted to make whiskey ourselves, and we tried to buy a few distilleries over the years and we were unsuccessful. And eventually we were able to buy Benromach in 1993, and now we're on our journey of we're building a second distillery right now, which is going to be producing whiskey before the end of this year. So that, the main driving factor was a family dream, but it was also a business necessity. When you work with distilleries and you fill whiskey at distilleries, there's always the chance that you may lose a filling contract because we're not buying mature whiskey as Gormagh Fail, we're buying new make spirit and we're doing the whole maturation ourselves. So as brands grow, as people change in distilleries, we couldn't guarantee that in the long term that we'd always get access to the spirit that we needed to for our business. So we fulfilled my grandfather's dream, and we also helped safeguard the future of our business by making whiskey ourselves.
Nice. And yeah, it's interesting. What's your take on? It feels like you guys were trendsetters. There's an awful lot of independent bottlers starting their own distilleries now. Is that something that you think would have happened if you guys hadn't started the trend, or is it just a natural progression?
I think I don't think we're fully responsible for setting the trend. I just think we're slightly ahead of our time in terms of the way that we've been focusing on single malt whiskey for 100 years plus, at a time when most people back then were focusing on blended whiskies.
Yeah.
In fact, if you went back in time, everyone would think the Urquhart family were quite eccentric. No one could understand why we were maturing whiskey for longer to release a single malt when we could have actually blended it and sold it at a much younger age, for almost the same money as what single malt was worth back then. Since then, obviously, single malt whiskey has become more popular. The trends are showing that it's going to be increased popularity of single malt in the future. And we're just been in a position of always having that belief. So we've set ourselves up for the success of single malt because we've always believed that single malt is a great product.
Nice. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. It's if someone wouldn't know better, you'd think that maybe Gordon MacPhail has a crystal ball, but in truth, it's literally just that they have a belief in the actual physical product itself, and it's great to see a company have such belief that they're willing to look that far in the future. And as you said, like, we've got a 45-year-old coming up later today, which is very exciting. But that's not even old for you guys, right? For Gordon MacPhail, you guys have whiskey that's 60 plus.
Yeah, the oldest whiskey that we've ever launched has been 75 years old, and that was a nice cask from 1939 from Mortwork. We released that back in 2015. It was bottled in 2014 and released in 2015.
Wow.
And that was a cask that had been looked after and watched over by four generations of the family, from my great-grandfather to my grandfather, my dad, my uncles, and my aunt, and then to the members of the fourth generation that are in the business today. So we could have bottled that whiskey younger. We didn't have to hold those whiskies back to reach that age, but we were looking for that kind of perfect match of spirit and oak, or when we felt the whiskey had got the right balance. And not all casks will be able to be matured for 75 years. The cask will be too active or not active enough. There's different things we have to watch out for. But in those special casks that have managed to be matured and still retain that balance of spirit and oak, and we've had some great whiskies released. And we've become quite famous for aging whiskies 50, 60, 70 plus. And who knows what the next one that we come out with will be. But it's something that we've been investing in a long time in terms of laying stock down. So it's definitely not the oldest whiskey we'll come out with in the future. Nice.
And yeah, I mean, I myself have been lucky enough to have a couple of the super old. We had a 1960s. Oh, blimey, I'm blanking on the distillery now. Linkwood, I think it was. Wow. Anyway, we had a super old Gordon MacPhail that we enjoyed as part of our sort of celebration of 2020 coming to an end a few months ago. That was just absolutely fantastic. And the thing that really caught me off guard was the fact that it was that old, but it was also first fill, which I've had so many people tell me that, oh no, first fill is only for younger whiskey. If you're having something that's, you know, even 20 years old, you need second fill or refill. And that doesn't seem to be something that phases you guys. And we're about to see that with the Benromach 21-year-old, which again has that banner at the top of exclusively first fill cask matured. So I'm really looking forward to trying this one. I haven't sampled this one before today, so let's see what this one goes for, shall we? And yeah, you can tell you mean business, because look at the size of the box. Actually, the difference of the box size between the 15 and the 21 is quite something. You want to protect this one.
It kind of goes back to the point you made before around 21 may not be old for Gordon MacPhail, but it is old for Benromach. We've only been making whiskey there ourselves since 1998, so this is the oldest whiskey that we've released under our kind of core range. 21 years of patience to get that point where we can actually release a 21-year-old. It's a very proud moment in the distillery's history, because we're now getting into that kind of more, well, greatly aged part of the portfolio, which we have to wait to actually achieve.
Nice. And I just want to point out that looks so cool in just the plain red box on the inside. That's really neat. I also got carried away. I should reveal the price of the 15 as well, because of course we do have that available right now at strathliquor.com as well. And actually a tip to those watching at home who are watching along at YouTube, especially if you're watching at the premiere, the best way to keep an eye on these whiskies is if you just go to the Dram Association page at strathliquor.com. So You can either get to it by going to dramassociation.com or stratliquor.com/Dram Association, or clicking on the menu. And if you go to the part of the featured whiskies, that will be updated automatically with all of these whiskies as they get featured in the video. So you can just click the refresh button and you can purchase them right there. So yeah, the 15 will have just appeared right now, and it is normally $139.87, currently $125.88. And yeah, I mean, you're still hitting that sub $10 a year mark, which I know for a lot of people is the magic zone. That is a fantastic price for a 15-year-old Benromach, and I can see why it's in high demand.
Yeah, the same pricing strategy applies to all the core ranges, about getting at a consistent point across the whole of Canada.
Mm-hmm. And I can also say with the 21-year-old, speaking of demand, I noticed when I was checking out some of our friends, the Kensington Wine Market. You're probably familiar with Andrew Ferguson over there. We work with them a lot because they're partners with us for the SMWS. And yeah, I consider Andrew a friend, and I've visited several times. And I noticed that on their site, I believe it was the Benromach 21 was limited to one per customer, and was like very strictly, we've got to portion this out. So I'm guessing this is pretty hard to get your hands on sometimes as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's very limited in terms of how much we can release each year. Again, it will grow year after year, but we're currently working on one release per year in the second half of the year. So this is the 2020 batch that we've got here. So there's no difference in each batch. It's just more when it will come available to the market. It won't always be available 12 months of the year. It'll tend to be the second half of the year we'll have that year's bottling done.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, let's see the cork pop.
Again, this one is it's a slightly lower kind of phenol content because it's made at the start of when we started producing whiskey there, so it's not quite 12 ppm. So it's got a little bit softer smokiness coming through. It's bottled at 43%, the same as the 10 and the 15, and it's matured and still in sherry and bourbon casks. But this time we actually use some sherry butts, and these are American oak sherry butts, so you get a little bit more toffee coming through in that older stuff. So it's not quite. If the 15 has got that hogsheads and that really rich European oak, here we still get an element of that, but we do get that American oak sherry cask influence coming through there as well.
Nice.
Because we don't always rely on European oak when we fill, we get our sherry cask made. It is a proportion. It's mainly European oak, but we do a proportion of American oak sherry butts, and that's particularly for long-term aging. And this links into some of the stuff that we do for Cormac Vale in terms of these really old whiskies we mentioned before. A lot of them were what we call transport casks. They were made from American oak, and they were what sherry was transported to Scotland in. And then we reused them, and they were made with thicker staves, and the American oak is a lighter influence. And that's why we've had some great success in maturing first fill casks for such a long period of time. So we still use that same kind of idea when we do some sherry butts for a number of our fillings, but for Benromach as well, just to give us that kind of lighter influence over a longer period of time, so we don't get too much cask influence coming through.
And if I'm not mistaken, the sherry bodegas themselves use almost exclusively American oak now for their actual maturation, do they not?
Yeah, but when we're working with our different bodegas and different cooperages, we're specifying the oak type that we use.
Mm-hmm.
So for Benromach, we predominantly use European oak because we want that richer, older style of kind of flavor profile coming through. Whereas, most of the sherry casks produced these days are American oak.
Yeah,
and they give the oak is very important. It does give a different flavor profile. For me, the one that always stands out with American oak sherry is that toffee. So you get a very kind of sweet vanilla kind of nose coming through, compared to that more dried fruits and cinnamon you get from the European oak.
Nice. And actually, just a little bit of a preview for Drinking Out Loud viewers and for Dram Association members of something that's going to be coming up soon. If you are interested in seeing the style that the actual oak itself, rather than what inhabited the oak in the past, is going to give out, we are going to be doing a really interesting Glenallachie tasting where they've got a bunch of virgin cask whiskies from different styles of oak, which is going to be really interesting. And of course, Glenallachie is also brought to us by the same company that brings us Benromach, so it all ties together a little bit. And of course, on that note, a huge shout out and a huge thank you to James at Authentic for setting this tasting up and for supplying the majority of the bottles here today. It's great to have your support for not only the store, but for the charities and for the festival as well, James. And cheers to you. It's got a lovely nutty syrupy thing going on. It's like I'm getting almost hazelnut.
Yeah, it's the smokiness is it's so soft at this age. You're just getting much more of that. I do get a little bit of toffee, but I am getting a dry fruit as well. A little bit of ginger, and just that really slight touch of smoke. Apologies if you get any background noise just now. I might need to.
It makes it more authentic. If you were actually in the distillery, we'd be hearing like steam columns and things going. So it's all right. This is spectacular.
So what we're trying to show with the core range is just that evolution of maturation and the effect it has on our spirit. So from 10, be that signature, elegant, fruity, but the smoke being quite evident, to the sherry cask influence coming through more in the 15 and the softer smoke, and then that just really soft smoke at the 21-year-old age. The 21-year-old may change slightly in years to come as we get into slightly older stock, but right now it'll be quite consistent with that American oak kind of sherry cask influence and that slightly softer smoke.
Nice. And it's really interesting as well to what I was mentioning earlier about that intersection between the spirit influence and the oak influence. You can really still tell the sort of the backbone, the spirit flavors through the three bottles here, and kind of you can feel it evolve. You can see the similarities between the 21 and the 10, but there's similarities there, but there's so many differences as well. It's quite an exciting little sort of adventure going through the three of them. And actually, I would recommend, if you're going to pick up a Benromach, you should pick up at least 3 so you can compare and contrast.
Yeah, we do want all whiskies to be different and actually show what the evolution is. If they were all the same, then why would you want to spend more on older whiskies? It's got to be about that balance.
Absolutely.
The evolution and different flavor profiles coming through.
But if you have tried the 10-year-old and you're a fan of the style, you know it well, I don't think you're going to go to the 21 and find that it's, I don't think you're going to be too thrown off by it. It's kind of what you'd expect in a sense. You can see the logical path that it's taken from the 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is absolutely gorgeous. So it is a very limited whiskey. Only a few cases came into British Columbia, and they're cases of 3 as well, which is kind of it's especially nice for smaller independent stores. We like it when things come in 3 because we don't have to cough up quite as much all at once. So thank you for that. But yes, we do have, I believe, 5 bottles available at this moment, and there is, I think, maybe 6 more left in the warehouse. I don't know if they'll still be there by the time the video goes out. Who knows? But if you are wanting to pick up a bottle of this 21, and as we said, we have no idea when the next time we'll see the 21 come in. It might be several months down the road, so before we see it again. The regular price is $273.83, and you can get it right now at 10% off for I think I've done the math wrong here, because it says 273.83 and then says 264.44. I don't think that's right. I'm just gonna have to check my spreadsheet. 1 second. I think I've copied that down wrong. Yep, you're quite right. I've managed to flip the 4 and the 6, so it's not 264.44. It's 246.44, which is even better. I'm glad I caught that. 246.44, which is very, very good for a 21-year-old official bottling of anything. And I would say that this is better than most 21-year-old official bottlings of anything. This is, again, stunning value. That seems to be the big thing with Benromach right now, is just how good value it is here in BC. It's a really unique, interesting style of whiskey, and with a fantastic story. But at the end of the day, it's not risky to try it. And that's one of the problems that we have right now, is we're not allowed in-store tastings. We can't do festivals. And getting this spirit to people's lips here in BC is tricky, unless you're part of an independent whiskey club that can do samples and whatnot. We can't do it officially, professionally through the store right now. And the festival obviously didn't happen this year. So whiskies that aren't going to break the bank, such as these, are a welcome sight. I would say these are a very, very safe bet for anyone who's looking at a lightly peated, a nice sherried backbone to it style of single malt. And hopefully we'll be able to put these on the floor at the grand tasting, the big consumer tasting, and the next whiskey festival, and more of you can witness the delights of this incredible range of whiskies.
Just one kind of final point about pricing. What we tried to achieve was just make it the same as other markets. So we didn't want anyone to be disadvantaged depending where they are in the world. So the pricing that we have in Elgin is the pricing that we're trying to achieve in key markets around the world.
Which is absolutely incredible for us here in BC, because we tend to be more expensive than most. So the correct price in the eyes of many people visiting for these whiskies is an absolute bargain compared to many, many other whiskies here in BC. So I'm not trying to say that these are, cheap by any stretch of the imagination. That's not the right word to describe these. These are priced correctly internationally, and you've done a spot-on job at doing that sort of line pricing across, which is something we just don't see often enough here in BC. To be able to say that these whiskies are approximately the same price across the entire country is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, it all came from a visit to Vancouver a couple of years ago, where I saw the price of the 10-year-old and thought we have to do something about that. So I'm glad to see it's working. I'm glad to see the positive feedback. So I'm glad it's working out. Excellent.
All right, so we've gone through the main core range, and I think it's time to do something that we love to do here on Drinking Out Loud. Oh, the siren's going off. It's a celebration on the streets here in Victoria. We are about to release a brand new whiskey to the shelves of the Strathliquor store here. A whiskey that we have the exclusive on in British Columbia, for it was not meant to be in British Columbia. We were just given the opportunity to bring in a small amount of this. This is a single cask that was actually bottled for a club in Edmonton. So I think the remainder of the whole cask is probably already sold out. I think it was pre-allocated to members of the club over in Edmonton. And we were offered, I think, 4 cases or something of this whiskey to showcase and to spread the good word of Benromach here in British Columbia. So this is very exciting, because I, to the best of my knowledge, have never had a single cask Benromach. And as someone who majoritively deals with single cask whiskey through our clubs here, this is an exciting time. I'm really intrigued to see what this brings to the table.
Yeah, so this is a bourbon cask from 2010, cask number 389. A lot of the single casks that we do are bourbon casks. When we first reopened the distillery, we filled a lot of bourbon casks and probably about 80% bourbon, 20% sherry. Then we've changed that policy over the years, but we still fill a number of American oak for that kind of balancing cask. And being a smaller cask and being a little bit different to the core range, they've been quite a good addition to the portfolio, because there's not too many bottles. And it is something that's a bit different to, I think you mentioned before, 100 proof you may have tried before, the old kind of.
Absolutely.
We do a cask strength vintage now, which is in the same style as the core range, where these bourbon casks just give a nice bit of difference, a different flavor profile to the exact core portfolio.
And for those of you interested in the cask strength vintage, I tried to get it, but apparently another liquor store managed to get all of it in BC. I'm still trying to find out what liquor store that is, so I can pass on to our members where you can find it in BC if you're after it, but it does exist somewhere. But luckily enough for us, we have a fantastic alternative in the meantime. Hopefully I'll be quick enough on the draw for the next set of the cask strength edition. But yeah, this is really cool. So it was distilled on, and now this is always fun, because is this the North American or the British date convention? It's either the 5th of July or I guess the 7th of May.
It was the 5th of July.
Perfect.
That's quite useful feedback that we need to make our dates into a more universal format. It was bottled on the 2nd of October 2020, so it is 10 years old.
Nice.
59.1% alcohol, and 239 bottles was the total outturn from that cask.
Yeah, it's I really like the fact that you're doing the single cask program. I'm hopefully one day we'll be able to get one just for our store. That would be kind of cool down the line. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But yeah, this is a really neat thing to be able to showcase here today. Yeah, on the date, it's tricky because it's only ever a problem if one of the dates isn't higher than the 12th, right? Because as soon as you see a 14 on there, you know instantly which one's which. But alrighty, nice. Yeah, I like how it fits really well with the branding, but it's obviously stands out enough simply because of the different bottom of the thing there. The top part is almost exactly the same without the border, and then a separate label for the bottom bit. It's
Yeah, it
clever.
just
I like
means that
that.
we can personalize that part for the different casks, but the different customer or whiskey club or whoever we're looking at to who's interested in buying the cask.
That's very neat.
We do a mixture of first fill bourbon barrels, but also we do first fill sherry hogsheads, a single cask as well now. So it's not quite as many as bourbon casks, but we are seeing that exclusive first fill sherry coming through into the portfolio now as well.
Oh, nice. All right, let's pop her open. Yeah, it's nice seeing the contrast of color side by side as well. It's a really good side by side of. I mean, I guess I should do it the 10 to 10, shouldn't I?
Yeah, so all our whiskies are naturally coloured. The core range is lightly chill filtered, so it is chill filtered, but it's not down to a negative temperature. It's to about 4 or 5 degrees. Whereas the single casks and our contrast range, which we'll try after this one, are all unchill filtered.
Nice. So yeah, just hold a bit of white paper at the background. Hopefully you can see at home the color difference there. Yeah, and it's really nice to see the difference that the sherry casks and the bourbon casks really bring to the mix. This has obviously got both, and this is just the bourbon. But it's also interesting because one thing that's is sometimes noticeable with cask strength whiskies is the density of the color as well. Like this has got such a it's more condensed, right? It's got such a nice sort of shimmer to it. All right, let's
So the smoke will be amplified in this one because it is cask strength. It is more concentrated, so it's not being diluted down to bottling strength. First fill bourbon, we're going to just give you that vanilla, citrus. You can get smoke, and you can get cream, butterscotch, or creaminess. That honey and vanilla are the kind of core flavors you get from a lot of our bourbon casks.
The real amazing thing for me right off the bat is how not aggressive it is on the nose. Like often with a cask strength whiskey, this is 59.1%. With anything around the 60% mark, I'm usually finding myself like I have to smell it from like half a meter away. This is just, I can get my nose right up in there, and there's the alcohol there's zero sort of burn to it in a sense on the nose for me. It's very approachable, which is unexpected, I think, personally. That was not what I was expecting for 59.1. It's definitely good. I don't dislike not having a burning sensation.
I think this is where our knowledge of maturation, making sure we get that balance of the right, when we decide to release single casks, really helps there. So we're really trying to make sure that you're not getting too young a whiskey, or it's just not the right balance. So all these casks that we release single casks go through our normal quality control process through my twin brothers team, and to make sure that they are the right quality to be released and bottled at that strength. So you are getting something that is palatable and right balance.
Yeah.
With water or without water.
What's the bottling process like at Benromach? Do you do it in-house, or is it all sent away?
Sorry about that. Yeah, we do a lot of our bottling in-house. We do have our own bottling hall based in Elgin, which is just kind of 12 miles to the east of Forres, where Benromach is based. And then we've had to do some outsourcing in recent years due to some work happening in our own bottling hall and COVID. But yeah, it's this cask here would be bottled in our own bottling hall.
Nice. Yeah, it feels like, often when you crack open a fresh bottle, especially at cask strength, it feels like it needs to settle down a little and oxidize a bit. It feels like it's already done that for us. It feels like pre-oxidized slightly, and I like that. I'm wondering if it was something to do with the bottling process, whether there was a little bit more open air or something.
You know, when we do some of our bottlings, which are set strength, we do leave them when we water them down. There is a underwater period, as we call it, to allow it all to make sure it marries and it's consistent. Because it's a single cask of cask strength, this would have been disgorged. It would gone through a filtration process, but it wouldn't have been chilled. It'd just been a standard filtration and then bottled pretty much straight away.
Cool. Yeah, fair enough. Well, I'm very much looking forward to going in for a taste. But on the nose, I just want to mention I'm staring at the back of the bottle and seeing, yes, sweet citrus aromas with vanilla. And I do very much get that and a hint of chocolate. But one interesting addition that I'd like to add as well, I'm getting a nice sort of peppermint kind of a hit to it as well. It feels somewhat Christmassy. It's like candy canes. Ooh. Yeah, and the smoke is much more present on the palate than it is on the nose. Oh, that is very good.
Yeah, the phenol content in this one would be the same as the 10 and the 15, so at 12 to 14 ppm. It's just amplified being cask strength.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, it's like I say, it's concentrated, right? It's like squash.
Yeah.
Which I guess isn't really a thing in Canada, is it?
But we do cask strength. It's like, yeah, it's concentrated. It's bolder. It's got more flavor to it in terms of intensity. Or maybe not more flavor, but it's got more intense flavors. And then when you water it down, it just evolves and it opens it up. So when we do our 43% whiskey, we're trying to get to the point where we feel it's really in balance. At cask strength, it's all to do with when it's ready to bottle that cask.
It's remarkable how drinkable this is at cask strength. I'm not one of these guys that is like a never add water person. I like to add as much water as I feel necessary for the whiskey when exploring, or just what I feel like when I'm drinking for purely enjoyment purposes. But yeah, I could definitely drink this straight out for the bottle. To be honest, I could chuck this from a hip flask quite easily. That being said, for scientific purposes, I will add a few drops of water and see how we go. Oh, wow. The viscosity there, as I add the water, seeing it diffuse into the oils of the spirit, that is, yeah. I've always been interested by the idea. It's such a prevalent thing that people do the whole looking for legs thing on the glass. I find it so much more telling by when you add a couple of drops of water, seeing how it diffuses and the oils disperse. For me, that's much more telling.
Yeah, I completely agree. With some of our kind of sherry casks, when you add even a touch of water, you see that cloudiness come straight through. It's got here, you do get a little bit of cloudiness because it's non-chill filtered as you add that bit of water. But
oh, wow. Yeah, that has really emphasized the smoke in such a gorgeous way.
We used to do a whiskey called Benromach Traditional. It was a whiskey we launched back in 2004 as a 5-year-old, and a bit of water to that 2010 just takes me straight back to that kind of. It was a no-age whiskey that we did back then, whereas now the whole portfolio has an age statement or vintage. But it's just when we were 5 years old, we just called it Benromach Traditional. So I used to love that whiskey, particularly when there was a nice warm day. It just a nice light whiskey that slight touch of smoke. Just made it quite refreshing.
Yeah. It's like a smoked sorbet. It's got this sort of real sort of, it's not, I don't know, maybe not sorbet. There's such a thing as a vanilla sorbet. It's not got like the thickness of an ice cream. It's got that more refreshing feeling of like a sorbet, but it's not as fruity, right? If there's such a thing as a vanilla sorbet that's been smoked, this is it, I think. Refreshing peat. That's something you can't really get from Islay very often, is it?
But the smoke we have, it's just that different type of smoke. There's no iodine or salt. It's just purely that kind of soft. And if you have a bonfire and you come back and you smell it close after a bonfire, is that kind of more wood smoke that you're getting?
Yeah.
Well, my interpretation anyway.
And it's the actual physical makeup of the peat, right? I'm guessing you harvest relatively close by to the distillery. Do you know whereabouts the peat comes from?
Yeah, it's Speyside peat. I believe it's from Tom and Towel. But yeah,
Nice.
the competition would be different. It's not coastal, it's inland, and it's
Yeah.
going to be more of that earthier bonfire smoke.
Much more heather and bracken, a bit of wood in there as well. No
Yeah,
seaweed whatsoever. Yeah. Nice. Mm. Well, I have to say, I'm blown away by that. If there's a wait list for us to be able to get our own cask at some point, please put us on it. Because yeah, this I don't think we're going to have any problems selling the few bottles of this that we have, and I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of requests for people wanting our own cask at some point. Maybe we can do a cask for the festival in a few years' time. You can come over and
yeah,
promote it. That'd be great.
I'd absolutely love to. Um, we we're small, so we can quite nimble, and we can offer casks, and we can definitely get a selection over to you whenever you want, for you to have a look at.
Nice. I would love that. But in the meantime, we're greatly honoured to be able to present this Edmonton edition, and thank you to the guys that made that happen. And this is available right this second. It is launching right now in real time, along with the video on YouTube at strathliquor.com, and you can find it for normally $144.26 if there's any left by the time this promotion ends. But right now, this second, you can get it for $129.83. That is the 10% off price, $129.83 for a cask strength single cask Benromach. And I have to say, that is, again, an absolutely insane price point for this whiskey. When it comes to single cask things, we almost always are looking at independent bottlers here in BC, and yeah, that I've never seen a 10-year-old from a prominent, A+ distillery like Benromach for this kind of price on the market in the independent bottle scene. In the last 5 years that I've been here in Victoria, it's just not a thing. So I'm very confident that this is going to sell out incredibly quickly. I can't quite remember right this second how many bottles we've got. It was either 4 or 5 cases. So it's either now that we've opened this one, there's either 23, I guess, or 29. Either way, I really don't think they're going to last long. So yeah, feel free to pause this video for a second and go purchase one and come back. We'll still be here, don't worry. Yeah, gorgeous. Thank you very much for being involved in bringing this one over. It's fantastic.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Cool. So we've taken a look at a bit of the core range here, the trilogy of core range releases from Benromach right now, and of course a special edition single cask. And this is the natural halfway point. We're 4 whiskies in. It all gets a bit crazy and a little bit maybe experimental for the second half. But before we get to that, there's an important part of the festival that is missing. That it's, the festival, as much as, it is very much for the charity, and we're trying to obviously still have that aspect here, and it's very much about promoting whiskies, and we're still doing that. There's a social aspect of the festival that kind of gets missed out on too easily sometimes with these digital events. One big part of the festival, especially for people who work in the industry like ourselves, is that sort of being able to hang around and have a couple of drinks at 1 a.m. after everyone else has gone home and just wind down for a second and chat. So in the spirit of that, and in the spirit of the community within the greater whiskey industry, we'd like to get to know you a little bit. So I've got a couple of questions for you. So first of all, how did you yourself get into whiskey? And I assume it's probably something to do with the family, right?
Yeah, it was, I guess I did my first day in the bottling hall when I was about 14 years old. I worked in every summer job after that as well, all the way through university. And then personally, I always had a desire to come back to the family business. So I did that roughly about 12 years ago now. And it was just an opportunity for me to get involved in the family business. And the first 2 years, I worked in every part of what we do, from Benromach, making whiskey there with our distillery manager, Keith. You'll see Keith's Cruikshank's name in all our bottles. He's been our distillery manager at the distillery since we reopened. So yeah, I've worked in every part of the business, and it was all very much following in my father's footsteps and being part of the family business.
Lovely. And this is always a bit of a cheeky question. And I'll be asking you this question twice, because we're going to be having you back as a guest for Gordon MacPhail as well. So we'll tweak it slightly for that one. And we'll just ignore for a second that you work with hundreds of different distilleries through Gordon MacPhail. But outside of the distillery that you're representing here today, what would you say is your personal favorite right now? Or couple, if you can't make a single choice.
It is quite a difficult question to answer when we can't go out to any bars or anything to try different whiskies. So it's what I've got in my whiskey cabinet. So yeah, I'm struggling with this one a little bit, but for me, it's more all Scotch whiskey is great whiskey. It depends on the mood that I'm in, and where I am and what whiskies I can access. So yeah, I've always been quite partial to Above Any. Really love that kind of unpeated sherry style that they produce there.
Nice.
Ardbeg, again, a complete contrast, but again, it's been in the right mood to try that as well. So I can't really give you a definitive answer, but yeah, I think all Scotch is.
I think perfectly good answer. Thank you for that. And actually, Balvenie brings up an interesting point, because if I remember correctly, and I might be mistaken here, they're one of the few distilleries that have an in-house cooperage, correct? I think.
I'm not 100% sure, but they do. Obviously, I think the size of the company they are, I'm pretty sure they'd have some.
Yeah.
In that.
Yeah, I think from recollection they have their own little cooperage on site. Is that something that Gordon MacPhail has delved into at all, doing your own coopering?
No, we've not. We work with Speyside Cooperage to buy our bourbon casks from America, and then the casks we buy from Spain, they're coopered locally in Spain and then sent over. So it's only we work with Speyside to do any repairs to casks before we use them.
Oh, nice. I'm assuming you probably get them sent over palletized, and then Speyside sort of builds them back up for you.
No, they come across intact. So we get
wow.
empty pallets empty casks from Spain sent directly to us, and then we use them directly. So it's only if we think they need any remedial work that they'll go and see a cooper before we use them.
Wow, amazing. So you're in the business of shipping air then?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the, historically, a lot of the remade hogsheads would have been remade American bourbon casks, but these days we do ship air from all around the world, it would seem.
Hey, if it makes whiskey this good, then I'm not going to complain. So we're going next into a bit more of an experimental side of things, looking at the contrasts range. So we've got three that we're looking at here today. We've got an old version of the Sassicaia cask, we've got the organic, and we've got the Peat Smoke. Which one would you like to start off with today? We
do the organic first.
Organic, perfect. All right. So the interesting thing about the organic is this is where I slightly question that this is purely semantics, but exclusively first fill cask matured. Does virgin oak cask count as first fill? I guess so. I mean,
it does, yeah.
Perfect. All right. Nice. Yeah, the world's first certified organic single malt Scotch whiskey. Again, something that other companies are catching up to a little bit now. There's a couple of others on the market, I believe, but this is certainly something that you guys had the forethought to consider well before anyone else was even looking at it, I think.
Yeah, it was an idea of I think it was my uncle Ian Urquhart, idea back in the late 90s, to looking at food trends was to look at something that was a bit different. So we explored into how we could produce an organic whiskey, and we get certified by the UK Association to produce organic spirit, and there's certain criteria we have to go through for that. And then we source organically grown barley. Locally, all the barley that we use have been only Scottish barley. This one is actually grown locally. I believe it's the brother-in-law of our distillery manager, Keith Cruikshank, who is a certified organic farmer, and he does the barley for us. And that's as far as you need to go to actually be an organic single malt. But it's not as far as we went. You picked up the right point. We use virgin casks. So we actually get certified organically grown oak from a forest in Missouri, send it over to Speyside Cooperage and get brand new casks made. So even the oak we use has gone through a process of being certified as being organic. So the wood itself has got a certificate to back that up as well. So when you look at other organic whiskies, I don't believe there's any other ones that have gone as far as getting their casks to be part of that process as well.
That is incredible. I guess the one last thing is it would be impossible to certify peat as organic, right? You'd have to go back a few hundred years.
Yeah, I don't think we looked into that so far as of yet. But that's why this whiskey is unpeated.
Really?
So this is why we're doing this as the first one of the contrasts. We're going to try the Saskaya, which has got the same 12 to 14 ppm, and then our heavily peated. So the organic is the unpeated expression that we produce since 1998.
Interesting. That's really cool.
And you may have been joking about the peat, but I believe that was probably one of the reasons why we didn't use that, because we wanted the whole process to be certified.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's really cool. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to trying this one. I've never tried the organic before. We have sold it in the store before. It's not brand new to us, but I just haven't had a chance to sample it yet. Nice. Is it the same malting house that you get the peated and unpeated barley from?
We work with 3 different malting companies locally, but with this one, we'll get the barley from our local farmers sent to the maltster to actually do the malting process for us. Whereas with the other ones, they'll actually source the barley on our behalf, but we will specify that it's Scottish barley.
Cool, nice, excellent. Yeah, there's a whole lot of color going on this one. The virgin cask is shone through. So this is no age statement officially, but it does have a distillation date, which is kind of cool. So we know it's at least 7, maybe 8, I guess. It was distilled 2012, bottled 2020 for this batch.
Yeah, that's correct. With all the contrast range, there will always be a vintage and a bottling year. So this one would be, a maximum of 8 years. But
nice. So this is a smaller batch, I guess. Do we know how many come out in each edition?
Approximately, I think it's roughly about 6,000 bottles in each batch per year. We make organic products for a few weeks a year because we have to clean out the distillery before we produce it. So it's usually after we've done a kind of normal shutdown, we'll restart with organic production, and it'll just be that one batch that we do on an annual basis. Usually the whiskey is between 5 and that kind of 7 and a bit years old, and that's put down to the activity of the oak. Because it's virgin oak, we have to be very careful that we don't get too much oak influence coming through. It's very easy that virgin oak will actually just overpower the spirit, and it'll be too woody and it'll be unpleasant. But because it's a vintage whiskey, we have the flexibility to make sure we can wait till we feel it's ready and then bottle it. That's why this one is that slightly older batch, because these casks are slightly lighter influence than some of the other batches that we've done in previous years.
Interesting.
For me, the organic plays one part of the process, but the flavor really comes from these virgin casks. The unpeated spirit, the virgin cask, you get that toffee, vanilla. It's probably quite like a bourbon in some ways, of that brand new American oak coming through and that unpeated spirit. So it's kind of why we call this range the contrast, because it's such a contrast to what we do as our core from our core portfolio, which we just tried.
Absolutely, and it's one of the things that that gets me on the nose is it's a little spicier than the other expressions. It's got more almost like cinnamon oatmeal kind of a thing.
Yeah, definitely. You definitely get that cereal note on the nose.
That's gorgeous.
Yeah, you get banana, some toasted malt, kind of key flavor coming through there.
Yeah, banana's spot on.
So there's one change to this bottling to what we did for the last bottling you had a few years ago. The original one came in a black tin. There was a no age. Then the next edition of the packaging from 2014 had that vintage and bottling date, as we moved to have at least a distilled and bottled date on all packaging or years old. But we've increased the strength of this one to 46%, which keeps it in line with the rest of the contrast range going forward. So that is the one change. It's a slightly higher strength. Even at 43%, we didn't chill filter it. It was always non-chill filtered, and those virgin casks.
I actually, I meant to ask about the chill filtration, because I noticed on the box, I think on the box for the contrast range, it actually says at the bottom natural color and non-chill filtered, whereas the regular range just says natural color at the bottom. But it's the case for both of them.
So the 10, the 15, and the 21, we do chill filter.
Okay.
But the contrast and the single casks and the cask strength. So anything we bottle now over 46% is non-chill filtered. The core range at 43 is, but it's a light chill filtration. So it's not chilled down to negative temperature. It's chilled down to about, I think, 4 or 5 degrees.
Oh,
so
cool.
It's just enough to actually make sure it stays clear in the bottle when it's transported around the world. It's
You
not
basically
trying
just turn
to,
the heating off for a few minutes.
yeah. So if you added ice to the 10 or the 15, it would still probably go cloudy because you're going to chill it below that kind of temperature. But if you just have it in the bottle, you'd have to leave it in the freezer for it to go cloudy for the core range. Whereas when we go for the contrast, it's more special, the more kind of experimental side or single casks. The knowledge consumers have, we feel, understand why it may go cloudy, and it's not. We're not trying to. Happy to bottle it just as it comes out of the cask or without chill filtration.
That makes a lot of sense. It absolutely does. And I think as well, it speaks to the fact that there's not like a giant number on this one as well, right? I mean, you're not trying to hide how old it is. You have a distilled and bottled date at the bottom there, but that's not the important part about this whiskey.
Yeah, I mean, age is just a number. It's all about the flavor of the product. I do think age gives reassurance in some way, in cases, to the product, but it has to be about the quality of the liquid has to stand up for itself. You have to be able to try the whiskey and see and make sure that you enjoy it and you like the flavor profile.
Yeah, nice. So that brings up an interesting question with the light chill filtration that you mentioned. I really like that idea, by the way. What kind of temperatures do you get in the maturation warehouses up where you are?
It varies. So at Benromach, we only use tonnage warehouses. So these are warehouses which are either 2 or 3 high, depending if it's the larger cherry butts or hogsheads or barrels. And they're on earth floor, so they're quite low ceilings, and it's just the ambient temperature. So what we do get is we've got some older warehouses in the past that gave quite a volatility in temperature because they weren't as insulated. And the more modern dunnage warehouses we have, they have much more of a consistent temperature coming through. But it will vary. From recollection, it won't go below freezing, but it will get down below 10 degrees. And I've not seen it go up above 20 from any of the stuff I've seen before. So yeah, we operate within that range.
Nice. I mean, part of the reason I ask is it sounds like the light chill filtration that you do it wouldn't be out of the ordinary for the temperature of maturation at certain points in winter anyway. The whiskey's going to get that cold naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
I used to with the organic when it was at 43%. If you left it in the boot of your car, a bottle overnight in Scotland in winter, you'd go out and see the bottle in the morning, and you usually get that haze coming through. Just as so you really see that effect of not chill filtering it and bottling at that kind of 42%. So 46%, it makes it consistent. We've not seen any change to the flavor profile, and it just makes it fit that kind of non-chill filtration part of the product.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. So if you're interested in picking up a bottle of this completely unpeated, completely organic, right down to the cask, Benromach edition, regular price at strathliquor.com is $100.78. But right now, of course, with 10% off, it is $90.70. And again, the best way to do that is to go to the Dram Association page at strathliquor.com, hit refresh, and you can go down to the featured whiskey section. And all of these whiskeys will appear there as they get released or revealed. Super cool. That's really nice. And I'm going to keep this box up here for a second because it's time for a different type of contrast from the contrast season, the contrast between the current branding and the previous branding. And they always say don't judge a book by its cover, but we always do. And with whiskey, you do taste it with your eyes a little bit before you even get a chance to sample it. And I do have to admit, I strongly prefer the new branding. That's not to say I disliked the previous branding, but like seeing them side by side like this, yeah, I know which one I would prefer to try if I could only try one from visuals only. But that being said, I've had several Benromach whiskies from the old branding, and they still taste just as good. And I think we're about to find that out right now. Was this the original branding from when you first purchased Benromach, or did you go through a couple of iterations before you landed on this for a while? So I know this was around for about a decade or so, right?
Yeah, so we launched that pack in 2014. The previous pack, which included a traditional whiskey that I mentioned before, was launched in 2004. And then we had a version from before that, and that was stock that we were bottling under the Benromach name, under the Benromach brand, but it was stock that was actually produced before we owned it. So this is the current pack is the fourth iteration of the pack.
Interesting.
And in some ways, it's going back to the roots. It's going back to what we did back in the early 90s in some ways in terms of the boldness of the logo.
Yeah.
But it's so we've gone through there's 4 different types.
Nice.
And each time we try to move it forward and we try to make it right at the time that we've launched it. Now it's just we just feel with the current pack, it's telling much more of our story. It aligns, it fits in with the color coding, the color scheme of the distillery. You get much more detail about what we actually do at the distillery. There's one thing we can't be in every shop in the world to tell our story. So we do need our pack to tell that story for us. And we feel the new pack does that to a greater extent.
Absolutely. And I think the one thing that I always champion in design personally when I'm working in design is functionality. And this is just such a functional branding. Like everything is so easy to read, it's so easy to see, everything makes sense with it. But it's also incredibly timeless. I could see this working 100 years from now very easily. I don't think you might never have to change your branding again. Whereas this one, certainly it works, but it certainly feels like a time and a place, right? It doesn't feel like it's necessarily going to have the same effect decade to decade.
Yeah, I mean, Benromach is quite an old distillery. I've not really mentioned so far, but it was founded in 1898. So it has been around for well over 100 years now. And it's just the modern packaging didn't maybe fit our brand story. We're trying to build it on tradition, the way it used to be made, and to have packaging that reflects that more traditional message. It just means that the brand story and the packaging tells the story in a better way.
Yeah,
but the quality of the liquid hasn't changed. Nothing's changed in what we do. It was literally just changed the outer pack.
Nice. So do you have a new version of the Sassicaia, or is this sort of a legacy thing now?
We've got no bottles of Sassicaia coming up in the near future, but it's something that we still have maturing in the house. Sassicaia is probably our most famous wood finish of recent times. We're the only whiskey company, to my knowledge, with permission from Sassicaia to use their name on a bottle of whiskey. So if you look at the back of the bottle, you'll actually see Sassicaia's logo on the bottle, and that is be endorsed and actually can use their name, because we're a family business. It's all about relationships and respect. So we ask permission before we use someone else's name, and that's why we can still use Sassicaia's name when we mature and bottle whiskies that have been finished in their casks.
Nice. Yeah, right on the back here. Cask Sassicaia. First fill bourbon cask for the first 6 years, finished in Sassicaia wine casks for a further 2. That's neat. So I have to admit, I'm relatively ignorant in the world of wine. I don't really know much about Sassicaia. The most thing I know about Sassicaia is that when this whiskey arrived on a pallet, one of my co-workers who's really into wine thought we had a Sassicaia and got very excited. And then I told him, nope, that's going in the back. We're releasing this in a couple of months at a special tasting. Don't touch it. And I was like, what are you doing with wine? He's like, nope, it's a whiskey. Trust me, it's okay. So what really drew Benromach to working with Sassicaia specifically for the cask?
With this one, I mean, we've experimented with casks for decades through our Gomer Fill business. And again, that knowledge and that experimental side continued into Benromach. So through our Italian importer, we were able to get some casks. We tried lots of different casks over the years, and we found with Sassicaia we get this really great flavor profile. It really adds flavor to our product, and finishing it just gives us this unique kind of more summer fruits, more red berries flavor profile coming through, and it works really well with our spirit. We also do other finishes we do a Bordeaux finish from Chateau Cisac. Again, we call it Chateau Cisac because we have permission to use their name. And I guess for us, it's a partnership. It's about respect with the cask that we're finishing it in, and making sure that it adds flavor. It changes the flavor of our product to make sure it's not just the same product with a different name. It's got to be an evolution of flavor.
Hmm.
This whiskey is matured in first fill bourbon. So if you think of the color now of that single cask that we just tried, that's the
Hmm.
color this whiskey would have been before it went into finishing cask. And then the finishing cask have then added that additional flavor by the 2 years. And rather than giving it kind of dried fruits and that sherry influence, it's giving it that kind of summer fruits and that more kind of that different flavor profile coming through.
Mm. The first thing that hit me on the palates, I couldn't wait. I nosed it. I was like, yeah, I've got to go straight in for this one. The first thing that I really got was something that I encourage everyone to try at least once: peppered strawberries. Strawberries are great, but if you sprinkle some salt and pepper on them, oh, just magnificent.
Yep, strawberries, raspberries, pepper, bit of spice.
Mm.
Again, it's quite unique. I mean, again, it's a contrast to our core range, which is bourbon and sherry. This is giving you something completely different, something unique. Again, it's a vintage product, so there'll be another vintage potentially in the future, but there will be another batch exactly the same as this one.
Nice. Yeah, this is something else. This is lovely.
We do bottle this one at 45%, and that's a legacy thing that across Gormacville and Benromach, all our wood finishes were always 45%. And I believe that's something that went back to my grandfather's day, and it's something that we've just continued. These are non-chill filtered, or unchill filtered, and 45% is just the strength that we do for those. So if you try a G&M wood finish, it'd be 45% as well.
Nice. So when you do release this for the next batch, is it going to be part of the contrasts range, or are you going to start a new range of finishes?
The answer is we've not decided how we're going to bring it into the portfolio yet.
Fair enough.
But we do wood finishes every year under the Gormacville portfolio. So who knows what that future will look like for wood finishes.
Nice. Oh, that is lovely. It says right here on the back of the bottle, milk chocolate as well. That's what I'm staring at right now. And yeah, it feels like I discovered an advent calendar at the wrong time of year. It feels like a summer advent calendar. It's an advent calendar in Australia. There we go.
Yeah.
It's like I'm eating advent calendar chocolate, but I'm doing it on the beach.
For me, that pepper strawberry is just sticking in my mind now when I try it.
Yeah, this is lovely. This is something else.
But Saskaya, as background, is a super Tuscan red wine, a very famous and exclusive wine brand. Wine will cost a lot more than buying the whiskey, because it's a very in demand and sought after product. But it does give us a very unique flavour when we do our finishing. So it's one that we're very proud of our partnership in terms of being able to use Saskaya's name, and we really feel it gives something that's a bit different to the rest of the portfolio.
Nice. Do you think we'll ever see the partnership, not necessarily with Sassicaia, because I know they're very traditional, but with some of the other wines that you use, will we ever see it the other way around, where we'll see like an ex-Benromach cask Bordeaux or something?
I'm not sure. I don't think it's...
That'd be kind of neat.
Yeah.
Buy it as a twin pack.
It's definitely one where, for us, getting access to casks is definitely something that we're comfortable with at the moment.
Mm-hmm. So that actually begs a question. If you guys specialize in first fill and use only first fill casks, what happens to the cask afterwards? Do they all go to Gordon MacPhail for other bottlings, or do you sell them on in the market?
A mixture of both. Majority will go to... We end up with too many second fill casks for our current capacity because we're filling first fill Gordon MacPhail and Benromach, and then we're using second fills to make up the numbers for G&M as well.
Nice.
But we do have a new distillery coming on the stream later this year, and that will require casks, and that won't be exclusively first fill. That will be a mixture of first and refill casks. One point to know as a business, we don't use any third fill casks, so all our casks are either first or second fill. Benromach's first fill, G&M, Gordon MacPhail is a combination of first and second fill casks.
Wow, no refill at all. Blimey.
So there's refill, the second fill for G&M, but there's no beyond that. It's either first or second fill for G&M.
That's amazing. So when I say refill, I don't know if it's normal, but especially with the SNWS, it's what they refer to anything that's past second fill. Like first fill, second fill, anything else is refill. But yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so if you see refill on a G&M label, it actually just means second fill.
Oh, really? Wow, that's cool. Wow. Yeah, that is quite the contrast. I know it's literally the name of the series that we're looking at, and this is kind of maybe a contrast, maybe not, in sort of officially. But yeah, I mean, it is quite a contrast to the regular spirit.
Yeah, it was a contrast in the old branding, so it's still part of that range.
Nice.
Anything that's not doesn't fit into that kind of core style that we tried, we will group under contrast, and it's all about diversity of flavor and different experiments.
Mm-hmm.
Triple distilled. We've done some different ones around barley types in the past. We did full maturation in port casks back in the early days. So we've done quite a few different one-off batches. And the ones that have been really well received, like the organic and the heavily peated and the Saskaya, we've had kept as a continuous release in it, usually on an annual basis.
Nice. All right. Well, I'm very happy to say that this edition is being released for the first time right now at stratliquor.com. We only managed to get one case. It actually came in almost a year ago, and we've been saving it, knowing that we're going to do a Benromach tasting. I'm glad we did, because it fits into this lineup really interestingly. So we do only have 5 available, because obviously we had to use one for this tasting. And you can pick one up if you're lucky. Regular price $123.39. Right now with a discount, it is $111.05. Yeah. Again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but just excellent value.
I think you're giving me a complex now that we need to look at our pricing structure for the market.
No, I disagree. This is the price that whiskey should be, and it's the reason that whiskey sales in BC are way down compared to several other provinces, is because we just get the short end of the stick tax wise, really, and it's not necessarily just tax, it's also the LDB warehousing fees here are astronomical, and we have to buy from the LDB for anything that's imported, obviously. So yeah, I mean, we're just incredibly grateful that we're getting the right price for a whiskey for a change. That's why it seems like great value. Lovely. Lovely. All right, so we have one more in this little contrasts series to look at today, and that is, as you mentioned before, the Peat Smoke. Mm-hmm. Holy crap, 42 ppm. All right.
So the phenol content will vary batch by batch. So there's a new one coming out this year at 55 ppm. We've done some up at 67 ppm. So each vintage has a different phenol content. And the instruction is just to get as heavily peated as possible, but that depends on the batch. So this one is the first batch in the new pack. Again, it's a vintage bottling. This one typically is around about 9 years old. This one's a bit older. This is going to be a 10-year-old, this one. But it's usually that 9-10 years old is the age that we...
nice. Yeah, distilled 2009, bottled 2020. So that's, 10 years old, maybe 11, but I guess 10. You know more than I do. You've got the inside scoop.
Yeah, typically it'd be 9, max would be 10. What we normally do.
That's really cool. And actually, a quick question on the phenol content as well, the ppm. There's a couple of distilleries now that have moved to measuring that differently. Are you guys measuring the barley or the spirit for the ppm?
Barley.
Barley, cool. The traditional way, because I don't know if you've noticed that. I can't remember. There's a couple. Anok is definitely one of them. Nok do. They're measuring the new make, the ppm of the new make, which is a really interesting way of doing it.
Yeah, I think you only get roughly about 10% of the phenol content in the bottle so it's only a small percentage. So the higher number obviously is at the barley stage.
Yeah. Nice. This is I'm just glancing at the notes here. Lemon sherbet and apricot finishing with smoky bonfire embers. This sounds magnificent. And in any normal circumstances would be a fantastic way to finish a tasting, but we've hinted that there's something extra special coming up after this. But
yeah, so we'll have a quick pause with some water to clear our palates after this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So I'm guessing, judging purely by the color, I was scanning to see if I could see anything on the box. First fill bourbon.
Yeah, it should say first fill bourbon just below contrast on your box there. But
bourbon cask matured. Quite right. Sorry.
Yeah. So first fill casks. We do an annual batch of heavily peated and first fill bourbon, but we also do a special release every couple of years of heavily peated and first fill sherry. And we have actually got a batch of that coming up in the next few months, which will be a first full sherry version of this one. But we don't do that one every year. So that one is usually high in demand because the color is incredibly dark and rich, and very different to this one. This one's fresh, vibrant, a summer whiskey with heavy smoke. The heavy peated sherry one is so much more kind of viscosity. It's thicker, it's the spiciness again with that smokiness. So it's very different because the cask is obviously so important to the final product.
So if to the guys at Authentic, if I might be too early here, but I want in on that when it arrives.
I've got a good allocation for Canada, so I can make sure we can get some too.
Beautiful. Alrighty. So we have an awful lot of peat heads over here on the island in Vancouver Island. I don't know if it's because we're the same kind of similar climate, I guess, but same kind of atmosphere, being right by the ocean as a lot of the places where peated whiskey is made. But a lot of people get drawn to the smoky whiskeys here for some reason. And in fact, it's the weirdest thing. I found more and more people who are just getting into whiskey just get they don't think they really necessarily like whiskey, and then they try something really smoky, and then they go off the deep end and get really into whiskey and pretty much only get smoky whiskeys. And then eventually 5 or 6 years later, they come out the other side and discover, oh yeah, it's not all about the smoke. You can have lightly smoked whiskeys or even completely unpeated whiskeys. But yeah, we're getting an awful lot of new whiskey lovers who are just all about this kind of thing.
So again, this one's bottled at 46%, like the organic, unchill filtered. As heavy peat as we can get for that particular batch, matured in first fill bourbon. So you can get all that kind of like that. It's like this one cask, the honey, the citrus, the vanilla from that American oak ex bourbon, but you can get just even more smokiness coming through. But it's still quite a light smoke compared to an island whiskey where you can get that iodine and salt, that medicinal element coming through. So it's not really medicinal. It's just really much a lot of smokiness and that bonfire smoke.
It's, for want of a better word, like a clean smoke. I mean, I know, medicinal should be clean because, hospitals generally are very clean. But no, it feels sort of almost like lemony smoke. It's very refreshing smoke.
This is my summer barbecue whiskey. We're in nice charred meats, outdoors, and the smokiness just really balances and combines with some kind of proper barbecued meats and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And I know for a lot of people this is heathenry words, but something that I relatively recently discovered as a fantastic summer drink is the Japanese mizuwari. It's just whiskey with soda water and ice. This feels like it would be such a really refreshing, beautiful summer drink served that way as well. I'm not necessarily recommending that to most people, but for those of you who enjoy that as an alternative whiskey imbibing method, I think this would work really well. But yeah, this is very summer smoke. Absolutely.
I think it's the nice change to the industry now that it's not a right or wrong way to enjoy whiskey. It's just about enjoying whiskey. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, that's the progressive change that I've seen over the last kind of 12 years about what is acceptable and not. I mean, if you take the organic whiskey, that makes quite a nice kind of Manhattan style drink with that American oak virgin. And that's just a way you can use that as a base to make a different type of, or make a cocktail.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's the thing, I would say there is, I don't want to say a correct and incorrect, but towards that sort of style thing of drinking whiskey, if you're doing it for sort of exploratory reasons, obviously don't add a crap ton of water or don't add any ice really at all if you're trying to explore and discover the whiskey. But if you're doing it purely for, non-educational purposes, if you're doing it purely for enjoyment, drink it however the hell you want, really. As long as you pay for it, right? Yeah, that is really good. And This is one of those whiskies where I'm sure a lot of blending houses are going, damn it, I wish they made more. I wish we could buy it. Because this is the kind of component that I could see a lot of blenders like licking their lips over.
Yeah, we only make two. I think we only make heavy peated for 2 weeks a year. We might even leave every second year, so we don't have a huge amount of heavy peated whiskey to go around. Because
Yeah.
we are. I mean, you can see behind me on this is our still house I'm virtually sitting in at the moment, and
Hmm.
the distillery is the size of the distillery is very compact. That from where I am, you can actually see most of the production process from the washbacks to the two stills, and that's the spirit still behind me. Whiskey safe is just behind that, and then we've got a mash tun in front of me effectively, and that is the majority of the production side in one place.
Nice. And it seems, just trying to judge, like based on the staircase, the size of that still, it looks almost exactly the same kind of size setup as a local distillery here, Shelter Point. So it's probably a similar kind of output as well.
Yeah, so we for every batch we do, we make 1,000 liters of spirit that we put into cask.
Hmm.
We do 3 batches a day now, 5 days a week. We don't work weekends, so we've got quite a. It's not continuous production, but it's roughly about 20 hours a day now. So we got quite long fermentation, which means we have 13 washbacks now, because we don't want to change our process by increasing the number of batches that we do. So we keep everything the same, but we just increase the number of times that we use the kit every day.
Nice.
And as you see the washback just behind me as
Mm.
well, that's one of the only original parts of the distillery that's left from when we bought it, or before we bought it.
Is
They
the
were
wood just for show on the outside, or is it actually a wooden washback through and through?
Yeah, through and through. All
Wow.
the washbacks inside are wood. So we there's four washbacks made from the original wood from the washbacks from before it closed in 1983. The rest of the equipment's all new. Not all of it was brand new. Some of it was second hand, but it was all new to the site when we re-equipped it. But
Nice.
there's one thing to point out as well, that we don't have any computers on site other than taking bookings at the visitor centre and for doing some spreadsheets. It is a manual distillery. The valves you can see behind me are literally how the distillery is operated. So nothing happens unless one of our distilling team, one of our distillers, makes it happen. So if Keith was on today or this morning, he'd be talking about how there's almost 4 ingredients at Benromach. There's water, barley, and yeast, and the skill of our distillers, because without them, nothing happens on site,
Yeah.
which isn't unique to ours, but it is part of the Benromach story.
Nice. Beautiful. Well, for those of you who are interested in picking up something a little peatier than the rest, that is, a very interesting diversion from both the standard Benromachs or from most peat that you might have had as well. Unless you're very familiar with things like the Rued Moor, that heavily peated from Glen Turret, that kind of Highland peat. There's very little like this, I would say, on the market at this level of ppm. I mean, there's other peated space sides. Certainly, we went through a few of them in a recent tasting. Even the Space Side Distillery itself's peated whiskey is fantastic, but I don't think there's many this peated. This is quite something. But yeah, if you're interested in picking one up locally, strathliquor.com, exactly the same price as the organic. Actually, it's normally $100.78, and right now $90.70. So yeah, pick one up while you can. So I think having a couple of seconds to have some water and refresh ourselves before we go into the big finale is a very, very good idea. So I just do want to mention again, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time out of your busy day to spend some time with our whiskey club here in BC. It is an absolute pleasure to have you here, Richard. And I do intend on visiting Scotland. I actually intended on visiting Scotland last year. Of course, that didn't happen. And when I do, I would love to swing by Benromach, and I would love to present you with your own 2021 Victoria Whisky Festival glass, because you were a part of it, an important part of it.
You're always welcome. Once the borders open and you can travel, just let me know, and we'll happily look after you when you come over here and let you see in person what we actually do.
Excellent. I mean, I have to say, I've never really seen the inside of the distillery in picture form, and just from the backdrop there, it's like, that is just, it's so beautifully, compact and clean and just beautiful. I really like how Like I said before, my design aesthetic is always function first, and it feels just like beautifully functional. Like there's no bells and whistles. You're not putting up like crazy decorations for the tourists or anything. It's just a perfectly functional distillery, and I love that.
Yeah, it is a small traditional distillery, so everything has a purpose, everything's got a function, and yeah, it's our pride and joy at the moment. So Benromach is something that we want to keep developing and pushing in the years to come, and hopefully growing in markets like Canada.
Absolutely. And we're also, of course, very excited to hear that you've got another distillery up and coming. And I'm sure one day in the not too distant future, we'll see that here in Canada. I say not too distant future, probably at least a decade away. Do you have any plans for the type of style of whiskey that your new distillery is going to be creating?
Yeah, so it's a Speyside distillery as well, and it actually banks the River Spey, just outside Grand Spey. You can see down towards the Cairngorm Mountains. The distillery itself is called the Cairn, and it's going to be very different to Benromach. Benromach's about handcrafting things a traditional way. This is a very modern distillery. It's a circular shape. It's got it's designed to be modern. It's to be automated. We don't have wooden washbacks. We have stainless steel. It's all about looking forward, and Benromach is about tradition and the past in some ways. So the Cairn itself is a really nice, meaningful name. It kind of maps a milestone and a direction. So this is almost, Cairn is our generation, being a fourth generation family business. Our addition to the business, our landmark of actually building something else, building something brand new. And as we go from owning one distillery to having two distilleries, which is a very exciting time for the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really exciting. I can't wait to see where that journey goes.
12 years is the answer before we plan to release a whiskey, so we've got a little bit of time.
Oh, beauty. I'll get prepared. I'll make sure there's room on the shelf for you.
Yeah. But it'll be a very exciting project to see it come to life later this year. Start producing. This centre will open next year, and that hopefully and we'll have people coming around to see it then as well, if it goes back to any kind of normality. And then we'll see how the maturation goes. It will be a mixture of bourbon and sherry. It won't be exclusively first fill. So we'll see when the whiskey's ready, and that's when the releases will be driven from.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Actually, on that as well, I've noticed there's a pretty big trend these days of distilleries starting to produce non-whiskey items. Is that something that Gordon MacPhail is looking at, or?
We've not looked at that. It's not been part of something. It's not been a discussion that I've seen in the business yet. As a business, we've been focusing on single malt whiskey. We did blends in the early days. We did blended malts. The last couple of decades, it's been focused predominantly on single malt. But we do have a gin brand, which is made at Benromach Distillery, called Red Door. So the colour scheme, as I mentioned a few times now, is red and white, and we've got lots of red doors. So if you go behind a red door into the old malt barn, you will find a small gin still, and we make Red Door gin, which is a Highland gin influenced by Scottish hills and mountains and the sea, because we're very close to Murray Firth at the distillery, and it's that's our venture into something outside of Scotch whisky.
Oh, that's cool.
Make gin.
And is that available in the BC market? Do you know?
It will be, hopefully, if James is watching this.
Nice.
It's a brand that we launched a couple of years ago, and we're slowly moving it out into international markets, with the US being the biggest market now for it, followed by the UK, and it's slowly getting some momentum. So hopefully it'll be into BC at some point.
Excellent. We look forward to it. It's seeming we're getting I think we actually have more Scottish gins than English gins now in the store, which is kind of interesting.
Yep, I'm sure I can speak to James and we get a sample for you to try it and see.
Nice. All right, so let's go for the big grand finale, shall we? So last year, we had the absolute honor of getting the only 40-year-old Benromach in BC. We presented it through one of our local whiskey clubs and through a video here. It was, like I said, exclusive to the Strath, and it was really just such a cool experience having a 40-year-old whiskey. We only had 2 bottles to sell after the one that we opened. And it's we actually had I think 7, 8, 9 maybe names going into a draw that we had to draw for the last 2 bottles. And when we were offered this year a 45-year-old for it's a little more expensive than the 40, but really not that much more for a 45-year-old whiskey, we jumped at it. And so we actually managed to get double the allotment this year. So we're not going to go to a draw. We're going to go first come, first served for this one. We're about to open one right now, which means we'll have 5 left. But this is such an exciting whiskey. Let's showcase it. A very, very familiar box for those of you who tuned into last year's 40-year-old. It's from memory, at least, almost identical. I still have the box of the 40-year-old. I actually have a little bit left in the bottle as well. I might do a side-by-side as a separate video at some point. 85 years of whiskey. But yeah, such a cool whiskey, and yeah, nice presentation as well, of course, as you would expect for a 45-year-old whiskey of this caliber. Nice little shelf holding it in. And there it is. Oh my God. Is it just me, or is that significantly darker than the 40-year-old?
Yeah, it's 5 years older, so it's a bit more color coming through. And a lot of the whiskey that we have, we've got 2 types of casks predominantly from before the distillery closed. So the stock from the 70s and the early 1980s. It's either remade American oak hogsheads or sherry casks. So This is the 45-year-old typically is a mixture of first fill and second fill. So it's not exclusively first fill because it's the stock that was made 45 years ago, or at least 45 years ago. So we do use some refill casks in those older products.
So with the new branding, you have to tweak the logo slightly.
Yeah, so it won't say exclusively first fill on the new heritage products, and there will be a new heritage product coming out towards the end of this year. Cool. It will be in part of an annual release, but details of that will come out in due course. But it will be a cask strength release that will be coming out.
Oh, nice. Excellent. So this is very exciting. Looks absolutely gorgeous. Very, very similar to the 40-year-old. It's running slightly. We've got a little bit of residue on there. I think it had it looks like a raindrop hit it at some point. 42.1 ABV. Is that a specific ABV, or is that cask strength for this one? Do you know?
It was cask strength. So the heritage range was always bottled at 43%, as our whole portfolio. So that's the change going forward. It'll always be cask strength. This one, with the batch of casks that we had, it didn't reach 43%. So we bottled it at cask strength. As simple as that.
You didn't just add some ethanol to it?
No,
nice. Yeah, this is excellent. So the back of the bottle suggests that we're going to get rich sherry aromas with fudge and hints of citrus, milk chocolate, and sweet spices, balanced by a delicate wisp of smoke. So that wisp of smoke, that's something that predates you guys' involvement?
Yeah, so I think in this case it will come more from the casks rather than the actual distillation. Benromach was unpeated back in the 70s. So it would be mainly used for blending. I mean, I think you mentioned earlier that there's very few independent bottlings of Benromach available.
Yeah.
And that's because most of it went to blend. And we don't sell any casks off the single into any brokers that would make it its way to independent bottlers. So there's just very little Benromach in the market now that's not under our control. But you have seen some bottlings come out over the years from like Scottish Malt Whisky Society and a few other companies.
I'm sure your shredder is probably full of shredded pieces of paper requests from independent bottlers for casks, right?
It's just something that we don't have the capacity. So it's not something that we've been able to even look at, because we've had to always look at keeping as much stock as we can, because we are a small distillery.
So it's not necessarily a choice; it's more of a necessity.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, we're very protective of our brand, so we're not in the business of selling casks to other companies. But there's also a capacity issue as well, that we are a small distillery. We're not making millions of litres of alcohol per year. If we're making millions of litres, we may have to look at different avenues to sell our spirit. But being this traditional handcrafted small distillery, we need to keep every drop that we make. I mean, we're making 400,000 litres now roughly. But when we first opened in 1998, we only made 130,000 litres, and we've gradually increased production over the years. So we don't have a surplus of stock. It's a nice place to be, but it's also a time machine kind of moment when you could go back and actually increase production sooner and have that confidence that we'd be able to sell more in the future.
Yeah, nice. And it's one of the things that stood out from the last time that George Grant visited. He was mentioning he's no longer in the whiskey sales business; he's in the whiskey allocation business. And I feel like Benromach's probably in that kind of realm as well right now.
Well, the 15 and the 21-year-old we're already there.
Yeah.
But we've only been at this since 1998 with our own distillery. George has been and his family been at that for a lot longer than that in terms of distillery. So it's slightly different. We're still quite relatively new boys in terms of distillery ownership.
Mm-hmm. But by no means does the spirit reflect that.
Yeah, I mean, so this could have been a mixture of casks that were destined to be Gomer Trail casks or casks that we acquired with the distillery.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still goes through the same quality process in terms of we check the quality of the casks, we make sure it's the quality we feel is required to be bottled, and then this would be a bottling of multiple casks together to get. Well, we had an idea of how many bottles we wanted to produce of this one, so I think it was roughly about 1,000. So we had to get enough casks together to actually hit that number of bottles.
Oh, cool.
Which is why it's more than one cask.
Yeah. Did you, before we dive into this, just one last question. Did you guys ever bottle much old Benromach before you bought it back in the pre-Gordon MacPhail days?
Yeah, so it would have been part of the Conscious Choice range, and Benromach goes back probably to the 60s. So some of our brown label, as we call it, Conscious Choice labels, were Benromach. And then even up into the mid-90s, we were still bottling under our cask strength range. And who knows, we might go back to releasing some Benromach under Gomer Trail in the future. I guess that's something that we've not done for quite a long time, but there's always an argument or discussion that we should maybe look at doing some different expressions, not under Benromach, but under Gomer Trail. But that's something that may or may not happen in the future.
I mean, it certainly would make sense to maybe look at the heritage ones as more of a Benromach / Gordon MacPhail thing, rather than the ones that you distilled yourself as just a straight Benromach. That would make a lot of sense, I think.
Or if we get into talk about maturation and different types of wood, maybe that would fit into Gordon MacPhail, which is about maturation. There's different ways. I mean, we're a small company and we're all one company, so we can look at different projects at times and see what happens.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, let's open it up, I guess. 45-year-old whiskey. I mean, 45-year-old whiskey is an amazing, magical thing anywhere in the world. But here in BC, for the vast majority of people here, will have not ever had an opportunity to try something this old. I mean, I've never really seen something like this even showcased at festivals. The oldest thing I've ever seen at the Victoria Whisky Festival personally is a 40-year-old Deanston that was around a couple of years ago, and even that only like 10 people I think got to try it. This is just a magnificent bottling that we just don't get the opportunity to showcase really here in BC very often. So thank you very much for your part in bringing this one over here.
Yeah. It's always one of the great things about the Victoria show is that we had at times the ability to take in some special whiskies. So hopefully we'll get a chance to come back in person and maybe have some really interesting stuff to try in the future next year.
Yeah, and we're slowly but surely working on being able to change the rules slightly. There's a little bit of movement on that. Hopefully by the time the festival is back up to full capacity again, we'll be able to have a little bit more free reign in what we pour there. But the last festival, the only festival that you've been here in person for was the one with the raids on the S&WS whiskies, wasn't it?
It was still a great festival to go to. I mean, it was a beautiful place to come. And then obviously, we have to respect the liquor laws in every province, and and sometimes that does impact what we can and can't pour. But if you have enough notice, we can even through the liquor board in the right channels, we can still get some really interesting whiskies into the market.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, so let's give it a shot. And I personally am one step closer to being able to do in-person tastings again, because actually about 1 hour from right now at time of recording, I'll be getting my vaccine shot. This is a perfect way to celebrate. I'm not sure they recommend having whiskey before a vaccine, but yeah.
I had my vaccine a few days ago, so I'm celebrating the after effect of it.
Oh, perfect.
The color of this one is just amazing. It's just that rich sherry influence coming through. You're getting that elegant, the oiliness you get from these kind of great aged whiskies. This is probably as close to G&M Benromach is going to get in terms of that kind of great age profile that G&M kind of really known for. And it's all about that kind of that. It's definitely European oak. You're not getting any of that toffee. It's all spicy, cinnamon, bit of leather, that dried fruits. But it's not over oaky. It's not too much wood. It's still really sweet and vibrant.
Yeah, I mean that's the always the worry with older whiskies for me, especially on the nose, that it's going to be too tannic. And it's just not. It's so inviting. The first thing I got on the nose here was like rum and raisin ice cream, but with the rum swapped out for whiskey, I guess. Or actually, maybe not even ice cream. Maybe rum and raisin fudge.
Yeah, 100% agree. It's definitely that rum and raisin coming through. It's so soft as well. I mean, it's still. I know 42.1 is still quite a low strength for whiskey terms, but it's still quite a lot of alcohol in a glass if you think about it.
Oh, absolutely.
That's still so soft. I would never add any water to a whiskey at this age because it's quite delicate and it's soft enough the way it is. And just enjoy it just as a really greatly aged single malt.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about whiskies of this age at a naturally low cask strength is you're getting all of that concentration of a cask strength whiskey with the burn just ripped out of it. This is, I mean, from the nose already, this is going to be just such a beautifully approachable, dare I say smooth, I hate that word for whiskey, but smooth, we'll go with that for today, whiskey, but with such a sort of almost a TARDIS of flavor usually at this age. And that's what I got with the 40-year-old, and I assume this is going to be the same kind of effect.
When we first bought the distillery in 1993, we launched a 12-year-old, which became a 15-year-old, then an 18-year-old. Then we went to 25, then 30, then 35, then 40. So this one's not quite following the same evolution in terms of time, but it's just the same spirit that we used to bottle quite young, just obviously maturing for a lot longer. So this is quite finite product now. We don't have a huge number of casks because these were all from before we owned the distillery effectively. So they are going to be incredibly rare, small outturn. A few of them are available each year in terms of products. And once they're gone, they're gone. We now don't have any casks from the 1960s left. So the last cask we had was our 1969 cask that we launched as a 50-year-old a couple of years ago. We're now into stock from the 1970s. And even then, we'll run out of stock there in the coming years. And then once we get to the early 1980s, that will be the last of the heritage stock that we have. And there will be a big jump. The distillery didn't produce from 1983 until 1998.
Oh, really? Wow.
A 15-year gap from what we class as heritage whiskies today to what we produce ourselves.
I mean, honestly, I hadn't really thought about it too much, but I was always wondering why there was no like 30-year-old. That makes complete sense.
Yeah, so if in 9 years' time, we'll have a 30-year-old that we've made. I was actually asked that question by one of our customers about when the replacement for the 35-year-old was coming out because we had some stock that is still in market. And I was like, well, you might have to wait 14 years before we can actually get that back to you. So we decided to remove it from the price list for the time being.
So on the palate here, I love whiskies that feel like they're telling me a story a little bit. And that's one of the things that always drew me to the SNWS is their whimsical tasting notes, especially the ones where they draw a narrative to it. And I like to sometimes challenge myself as for non-Scotch Malt Whisky Society whiskies to try and imagine what they might have called it. And the image that I'm getting for this one, especially on the palate, is secret cocoa hidden in a humidor. it's like someone's hoarding away that they're not supposed to have any chocolate, and so they're trying to hide it. So they're hiding it in the humidor along with the cigars, and that's kind of the effect that I'm getting with this. Is a really deep, earthy. Yeah, it's not like the peat smoke. It's not anything like the smoke that we got from the other Benromach editions, but it's that there is like a more tobacco-esque kind of a smoke on this one for me. Mm.
Yeah, I see what you mean about that tobacco edge. It's just got that, just towards the end, you just get that little bit of kind of subtle smokiness.
Yeah.
But it's different to the Curaçao. Yeah, definitely think it would be coming in from the cask rather than actually from the oak, rather than from the distillate.
And there's a nice sort of rich leatheriness as well. It's like saddles.
I mean, it's just a whiskey you can nose without drinking. There's so much on the nose and complexity there.
I've always wondered if there's a market for like for whiskey diffusers, you know, where you can make a house smell like whiskey, like Airwick whiskies.
Yeah, all you need is a fire, some snow outside, and this whiskey would be right in its element.
Yeah. Oh, that is something quite magical. And if you at home have some kind of special occasion that needs a special whiskey to toast, this could well be the perfect whiskey to add to your collection. Or, you know, not necessarily for a special occasion, as Richard said, perfect for a winter's evening in front of a fire as well. And honestly, probably just as perfect for sitting on the end of a dock with your feet in the warm water of a lake. This is just a stunning whiskey for any real purpose. And we do have 5 bottles available in BC, the only 5 bottles available in British Columbia. The regular price is $1,644.26, which means that, yes, we are giving you 10% off on this bottle right now, which, you know, I didn't clear that with management before I just announced it, and hopefully I won't get fired for this, but yeah, sure, we're giving you 10% off. It is now $1,479.83. So yeah, you can save a decent chunk of money on that right now. $1,479.83 for a 45-year-old whiskey is unheard of in British Columbia. And yeah, this is an absolutely incredible 45-year-old whiskey for that. And I'm always slightly worried with old whiskeys. And I wasn't worried about this one because I tried the 40 and was enamored with it. Honestly, some of the worst whiskey I've had in my life has been whiskey that has been kept in a cask for far too long. But obviously, you guys know your wood so incredibly well. Like through the whole Gordon MacPhail program, you know exactly what you're doing. And yeah, this is just spot on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a key point with we may be a young distillery in terms of 20 plus years, which is quite young for Scotch whiskey, but we have been maturing whiskies for a long time. So we do know how whiskies do mature, and we can make sure we get the right quality. There's no point releasing an old whiskey if it's not the right quality, and it's not going to be enjoyed. It's got to be in balance. It's got to be the right flavor profile. Otherwise, we just wouldn't release it.
And it's one thing to have a whiskey that you didn't enjoy that was $100 a bottle. It's a completely different ball game if you're having a whiskey that isn't very good at $4,000 a bottle, right? There's an expectation to uphold with a whiskey of this caliber.
Yeah, you're completely right. The pricing of and the value in old whiskies, it's got to be something spectacular. You're buying something that's unique and rare, and there's definitely an element of it's something that can't be replaced, but it still has to be founded on the kind of the quality of the product itself. Absolutely.
Well, this has been incredibly special and a perfect way to toast the day. Yeah, I look forward to sharing this with the lucky members of some local independent whiskey clubs who are going to help us raise some money for the Victoria Whisky Festival. Thank you to everyone who's been tuning in on YouTube and joining in at the live chat. If you are joining in a little bit later and the live chat is closed, because the live chat's only available during the premiere, If you are joining in a little bit later, please drop us a comment. If you have any questions for myself or for Richard, I'm sure we can forward a couple of questions onto him, especially as I'll be seeing him again in a couple of weeks for another tasting. Please let us know in the comments section as well. And yeah, Richard Urquhart, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. Thank you very much for joining us.
Adam, all I can say is thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here, and thank you for all your kind words about our products. And I look forward to a few weeks' time. And thanks to everyone at home who is tuning in to watch it. I really hope you enjoy our whiskies and you learn a bit about our brand and our history. So thank you again, Adam. Thanks to everyone. And Slange.
It's an absolute pleasure. Slange Shavar, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks for a Gordon MacPhail tasting.
Find your way home. Your